Hello everybody, welcome back to our channel. Today we're going to go into a certain topic. I'm going to try to keep this channel as not as structured as I want it to be not just a structured, let's put this and this and this. I would rather keep it into like a conversational format, and whatever comes out comes out. But today we're going to go into basically why do we believe that the Bible is true. And like Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Nobody comes to the Father except through me. That is a very bold statement. What does it mean? Why do we believe that? Why do so many people believe that throughout the entire world? It's one of the biggest religion, if not the biggest religion in the entire world. I mean, especially in the West and in many areas. So there has to be something to it. And I think sometimes when you get into topics like this, especially in maybe Christian circles, if you're a skeptic at all, that's looked at as kind of bad. Like, well, how could you question, anything? So, but I don't know if that's such a good thing, because I myself did not become a believer until I was about 25 years old. And I was a very skeptical person up until that time. And even today in Christianity, I've been a Christian for about 12 years. I still have that kind of attitude, like I have a skeptical type of approach to things. As soon as I hear something, I immediately, I don't just automatically believe that what that person is saying. I have to, read it out, study it, and I personally believe everybody should be like that, no matter, no matter what, because there's a lot of things out there that, I don't know, you can hear from a pulpit, a preacher, doesn't mean it's true, or with any kind of subject. I think that's important. So, one of my biggest, and I just remembered, I had something that I wanted to touch on, and I couldn't remember it until now, but I personally love to watch, like, mysteries. Like, I'll go on YouTube videos and I'll watch certain channels that go into, like, the weird, dark, and mysterious things that people, have seen, or, tall tales and stories. I mean, I don't believe them, but I find them interesting, or, that's not all the channels are about, though. But I was thinking, basically, I find it extremely interesting that no matter if you're a Christian, if you were raised in the church or not, you know nothing about the Bible, nothing. Everybody knows the story of Jesus walking on the water and raising from the dead, and all the, a lot of the types of miracles, but to me, if you really think deep about that, that's a pretty astonishing thing, because like when I watch these, dark and mysterious type of things, I mean, they're endless. These people are on a ship in the middle of the ocean. They claim to see this or that, and but they nobody knows anything about these people or the story. A day later, I mean, it might become a story, and it might cause some traction or whatever, but I mean, it fades away into the, it just fades away, because I don't know for what reason, but personally I believe because it's not true, but I still find it interesting to watch and to listen to, because I'm just into that kind of thing. But it's pretty amazing to me that, during the times of the Roman Empire, the biggest empire the world has ever seen, it stretched all the way from like Spain all the way almost to the borders of China and India. Like, it was huge. And to think that this little tiny speck in the middle of the Roman Empire, which was Judea, and even inside that little speck was Galilee, which is like, it would be almost like the backwoods of America somewhere in some town nobody's ever heard of. That's what Galilee was. And 12 fishermen who were very young, they claimed to see this guy walking on the water. And we know about this 2,000 years later. And they claim that he raised from the dead. And everybody saw him. And we still celebrate this 2,000 years later, and it's believed by millions of people. So I think it's pretty interesting that everybody knows that story, but in the world's biggest empire that's the world has ever seen, most people can't even name for you the first 5 Caesars of that empire, but they can tell you about this one man who walked on water and was raised from the dead. I find that to be supernatural, personally. And this is coming from somebody who's I'm a skeptic. It's very hard to convince me of anything. So for me to believe, and that's not the only reason I believe, that's just an example that I find interesting. There's a lot of reasons I believe and have come to believe, but that's just one example I'm giving now. But I don't know. What about you? Why do you believe? Why do you think the Bible is true? And the fact that we say that the Bible is inerrant. It has no errors in it. It is the Word of God. Like, how can we make a claim, and why do you believe that that's true?
Well, I started believing when I was like 6. So I, at first, just believed because I heard it and my parents taught me, and I believed it out of just faith like a child. But as I grew, I had more questions, and I looked to the Bible, and I've heard a lot of arguments against Christianity, and I don't think any of them hold up, because like he said, there was 12 fishermen, but they were willing to die for this story. And if it wasn't true, if you're in the face of death, and it wasn't just the 12, there was many more, you'd think that you would, be like, okay, I lied. Because what were they gaining from it?
Well, that's another thing. Like, I like to watch court type of things, too. And, like, if someone's lying about something, when they're in the face of even going to jail for the rest of their life, like, they will break. If they're lying, they will break. But these people were willing to go to death. Now, they had to be completely convinced, and not just the 12, disciples and the apostles, then all the church. You know how people still to this day die for that faith. Now, we could also say that we are not the only religion who has that. I mean, I know people who are, in Islam who will die for their faith, Buddhists. I mean, so my point, it's a strong case, but I don't think we could just relay, well, we're the only ones who believe this, and we're the only ones who have martyrs, and we're the only ones with this. So I think you have to get a little bit deeper when it comes to truth claims and stuff like that. So, but it is, impressive, because they did believe in the fact, and to the point of death. Like, so if they were lying, and this was a hoax, like some people claim, which I think is very weak. If you don't believe, you don't believe. I understand that totally, but to say it was just some hoax, that seems kind of weak. And it also has spread throughout the entire world. Religion itself has changed, and the world we live in has changed because of Christianity. And this was a truth claim, by Jesus himself. He said, what did he say? I don't know, my mind is blank. But he said, his message, his gospel will spread to all nations. And all nations would hear of this. And it's another thing, if you think about it, this little, in the times of the Roman Empire, this was just Judaism was not a world religion at that point. All nations were pagans, idol worshippers, or whatever. So Judaism was not a popular faith. And then inside of that was a very small faith of Christians who broke out of Judaism because Jesus came as a Messiah. And Judaism was changed forever because they lost their temple, just like what was Jesus told. And he says, this temple is going to go, and it's going to, not one stone will be left on another. This happened in the exact same time that he said it was going to happen. And Judaism crumbled. And Christianity spread throughout the entire world and Christianized the entire world. Has Christianity been perfect in the entire world? No, not at all, because we
don't follow the Bible as we should.
Yeah, and this is actually going to be a 2-part video, and we're going to get more into that next time. Why don't Christians? We believe that the Bible is the inspired Word of God, and we believe in it. But we don't. A lot of Christians don't know it. They don't want to get into it. They're too afraid to. So next week it's going to be more about why do Christians who claim to believe in the Bible not seem to know the Bible or want to get into it or are almost afraid of it. You go into a lot of these churches and they're afraid of rocking the boat. So that's going to be more of next week. But this week we want to go into more of why we do believe and the things that we believe. And these are just a few surface things that I've brought up.
And I think, looking at the Bible and all its claims, and just from start to finish, how it just fits together. And there's been, so many authors. I don't know the number. There's 66 books, right? And different authors throughout thousands of years, and it fits together. You can reference here and reference there, and people say that there's contradictions. I don't think there are.
Well, I think the contradictions that they speak of are not very valid, because there are minor differences.
Right.
But I was listening to this lawyer one time, and he was saying, if 2 witnesses are on a stand and they tell the exact same story word for word, they know they're lying. Yeah. Because they've choreographed this together. It's so they actually look for certain, variations in the story to know that it's legit. Because if it was just word for word, exactly, so if the Synoptic Gospels were actually literally word for word, this would cause in a court of law, this would actually, people would be raising their eyebrows,
like they worked together to come up with a story.
Yeah, they came up with a story. But so actually lawyers look for certain inconsistencies within a story, so that's how they know it's genuine. So
and just going off of that, there's different perspectives, they're all with them eyewitnesses, which in court, if you have 2 or more eyewitnesses, that's a pretty big deal. He had 12, that were willing to die for this, and I know
actually, I think there was 500 who saw. That's what
after the resurrection.
After the resurrection.
Yeah, so there was a bunch of eyewitnesses that were willing to die for that. And they had nothing to gain. And I know that that is not the strongest argument for
I think it's not the strongest argument, because there are a lot of people in today's world who take up Christianity and they have a lot to gain by manipulation and stuff like that. But that wasn't the case with the first century people who actually wrote the Bible, because they didn't they actually lost everything. And there's still people to this day who lose everything for their faith. I meet them even still to this day who, because of them following Christianity and following the Bible, they actually lose more physically. In our view, we gain so much spiritually.
Right.
But you lose things in the world. Mm-hmm. But there are people out there who view this for gain, and you see them on television.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know if I touched on it before, but I know that also Christianity did change the world. Before Christ, most of the world was idol worshippers. They had gods everywhere. Like I read this book by Mary Beard. She writes a lot on Roman history, and I love to read her. She's great. And basically, she was talking about how every household had a certain god. They all had their certain gods for this and this and this, and they all had, and all the nations were idol worshippers, and they had their own, national deities. The Babylonians was Bel, and the Romans, they had Neptune and Saturn, all these gods. So, but when Christianity came along, this ceased. You don't ever meet people who are, Baal worshippers. I'm not saying there's nobody out there that is. Maybe there are, but I've never met one in my entire life. I mean, in the three main religions, there's Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. These are all based on the same book. I mean, yes, Islam has the Quran, but it still has the same, prophets and stuff that the Bible has. So
they all acknowledge, Islam acknowledges Jesus.
Yeah, but they don't view him as the Messiah.
Right.
But they acknowledge him, that he was a prophet, and they acknowledge the prophets of old. They acknowledge Mary. So it's huge. It's everywhere. There's nobody who hasn't been affected by this Abrahamic religion.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't see idol worship. I'm in the sense of like it was in the ancient world. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist today, but
nobody's sacrificing to it.
Yeah, you don't see sacrifices
in a temple or anything.
And temples. These were ancient world things, and Christianity put an end and a stop to this. And that is another thing. I remember I was reading. It was Plato. I don't remember which one it was, but they were talking about how they just got back from doing the sacrifice in their temple, and it was like very nonchalant. It was like just a thing that they did back then. It's like, oh yeah, we just came back from the temple and they did their sacrifices, and I'm like, oh, it was just such a different thing. We don't live in that world today, and Christianity had to do with that. So it has to be something to it for something so small to blow up into what it is even today, 2,000 years later. I think that there's something there.
Yeah, and archaeologically, they find all these places and that the Bible talks about, and I think that's pretty fascinating. That history just goes along with it, like the kings listed, and historians, record things that are recorded in the Bible, and I think that that's huge as well.
Yeah, especially if you get into first century, like Josephus, there's Tacitus. These people, Tacitus is more concerned about the Roman Empire, so he does touch on certain things about what happened to Jerusalem in 70 AD and leading up to that. And, he does confirm some of the things that are prophesied about in the Bible. Josephus, though, he goes into a lot of things, and he was not a Christian. He was not somebody trying to prove the Bible right. He did not view... He didn't acknowledge Christianity. I know that he knew it existed, but he almost barely gives any mention to it, because to him it was probably just another sect. But he was an eyewitness to a lot of things. And, even if you go further back in history, we have Herodotus, who mentions, some of the kings and some of the events that are recorded in our history, in the Bible's history, and it is kind of like a detached type of, he was not interested in the God of the Jews at that time, but he was just recording history between, like, what happened with one of the kings of Israel and the Assyrians, and there's a certain thing that was recorded. So it is interesting. The Bible has never been able to be disproven. There's never been an archaeological finding that proves like, oh well, this was just not true. Now, I don't like to base my faith on proof, because I think that's kind of shaky, but I find interest in it. It's interesting to me. Yeah. But I do watch some channels that try to kind of go too far with that, and sometimes even me, who I do believe in the Bible, even leaves me scratching my head. Like, what?
Yeah.
That's kind of weird. Like, you can't really. It's kind of like an assumption you're making at this point.
Yeah.
But so that's why I personally believe, and like I said before, getting someone like me to believe in anything, it's definitely supernatural, because I just am an extremely skeptical person, but
Right.
I have grown to believe. I still grow every single day, and that's, I mean,
One of the shallow reasons that I believe, for sure, is the design of everything.
yeah,
You know,
well, it's
that
not really
to
shallow.
me, that's an obvious, just, and people would be like, oh, that's easy to argue against because we live in such a scientific world. But to me,
Yeah,
it's
with
like,
our scientific world, though, not with all the resources and science that we have, you can't. Nobody can make water. Nobody can make a blade of grass. Nobody.
Right.
You can't make these things, which are just simple things you walk past
right.
every single
And
day.
we have all the ingredients, but their argument is that everything came from nothing.
Yeah.
So it's just, it doesn't make sense. And to me, it takes more faith to believe that everything created, kind of perfectly, from nothing. So to
Yeah.
me, it's like, that is, I can look around, and I know that that's not a good argument on a lot of things.
Well, the thing is too with that, like, we have the starting point that we believe the Bible, and we believe the Bible is true.
Mm-hmm.
But you can believe that a God created this universe, a mind designed everything, and still not be Christian.
Right.
So there's a lot of people out there who'd be like, oh yeah, definitely, there is a God and he created this too perfect, but they don't give any, they don't care anything about the Bible or Jesus or Christianity. So even though it's interesting, yes, but it basically, that just proves that there's design.
Right. That would be why I believe in creation, I guess.
Yeah. But then you can get into, long Earth creation, short Earth creation.
Right. I don't have a stance on that.
No, I really don't either. Some people get, if you go talk to like a Christian fundamentalist, and they're like, it was created 6,000 years, and then, if you don't believe that, you don't believe in the Bible. Be wary of people like this, because they should probably, calm down a little bit. Because I do know pretty strong Christians who believe in old Earth. I mean, I don't know how I stand on it. I don't study that enough, to be honest with you. If I found out tomorrow that the Earth was 6,000 years old, or if I found out tomorrow that the Earth was billions of years old,
it wouldn't affect our faith.
No, I wouldn't care. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But, so, I don't know. I don't want to make this video too long. We're already coming up on 23 minutes. But, so these are just some surface things, and I mean, some of it's kind of deeper. But next week, we want to get more into some of the truth claims, and maybe some of the deeper things into, why the church seems to want to distance themselves from kind of controversial things that are in the Bible. I mean, we want to say that, oh, we believe the Bible's true, we believe this. But then when you start asking questions to the church, like, well,
They shy away.
Yeah, they shy away, or like, let's not talk about that because we're going to, we don't want to rock the boat.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I think we should.
I think we could deepen our faith for sure. I think that our faith could become deeper if we were willing to go down these deep alleys, and really study it out. But I think
I think people are scared too.
A lot of churches are more interested in numbers. So and I know
traditions.
Yeah.
Traditions, numbers, these kinds of things. And we all come into things with traditions and our mindsets, and that's fine. But I think there should be a little bit of skeptic in everybody. A little bit. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to ask deep questions, maybe about things like, well, the church has always believed this. And I'm like, well, why?
Right.
For what?
I teach my kids that. I'm like, even if I say it, it might not be true. Like, it might be what I legitimately believe, but, study for yourself. Don't automatically just because I say it.
Yeah.
And I try to teach my kids that at an early age to question what they're taught.
Yeah. So next week we'll get more into some of the truth claims of the Bible, some of the more controversial things. So that'll be interesting. But thanks for joining us, and
We'll see you next time.
we'll see you next time.